My name is Dustin Wheeler. My family calls me Duck Duck, and my love of wine created the Duck Vine. The joy and passion I have is a bottle of knowledge I want to share with you. Let me be your favorite sommelier and pour you a big glass of edutainment so you can sit back, swirl it, sniff it, and sip it as we ducks fly together through the wine world. Let's duck and go. Hey everybody, welcome in our new episode of the Duck Vine podcast. Here we are going to take a little bit of a different approach on this guy because we're tackling a topic that we've mentioned many of times and have prefaced with how complex and how complicated this topic gets. Now, when we get into the region of Burgundy, it is not drastically a huge region, but has become such a big player in the wine world because of so many little nuances about it that there are many masters in the wine industry that are completely devoted to Burgundy and nothing else, and can still be missing information just in this region because of its depth, its history, its uniqueness, and just how much really there is to give out of Burgundy. So on this episode, something I would like to try, see what you guys think, is we're going to go through the episode, and this one may be a little more textbooky. There's some fun things to talk about in here, but I really want to give a good overview of Burgundy and then kind of break it down into some smaller episodes in the future if you guys really like this. But at the end, to kind of challenge ourselves and see how well we've been doing, I may ask a couple of potential questions as well to see if you can nail those. So, without further ado, let's get into it. Burgundy is really often thought as one of the world's most difficult wine regions to understand. And the crazy thing about that is, even though they say this, most of the wines are really only made with two great varietals, Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. It is a very intricate and complex system of land ownership that makes this region really difficult, and that plays back into a part of history that most people have heard of this gentleman, but may not have realized his impact on wine because we often hear his name and think of, like war. So let's begin with the history and see how we can kind of catch up with today. So during the Middle Ages, much of the land of Burgundy was actually owned by the Catholic Church, the Benedictines, and then the Cistercian monasteries. The Cistercian monks around the 11th century really, like, you think I get nerdy about wine? These guys got painstakingly nerdy, studying not only the vines and their characters when growing, but even the land, the soil underneath. So they got so into the minute details that they would block off certain parts of the property as a more superior parcel of land than the ones next to it. And this is actually where we come up with the term close, C-L-O-S, that you'll see on labels from time to time. That indicates a part of a vineyard that's surrounded by a stone wall. So you may have this big producer or famous producer, and then in the middle of their vineyard, there's all of a sudden this stone wall. It's not some structure that's been knocked down or something like that. It is actually there to kind of protect, like, the soil here is better than anywhere else in this vineyard. And it can be pretty small, 10-yard wide kind of blocks that they mark off. So it gets really interesting how intricate the little details are. These vineyard plots would eventually become many of Burgundy's most prestigious appellations and really where the highest dollar wines come from. And we've talked about Bordeaux, and we've mentioned Burgundy in the past as far as their labeling, But this is really why Burgundy goes off of the location versus Bordeaux, where it's off of the house. So we determine the quality of the wine or the prestige of the wine based off of what vineyard it's coming out of, sometimes the row, so on and so forth. And so that's why on Burgundian wines you see a location name versus grape varietal or a maker. It's the area is more important than anything else in Burgundy wine world. So during the French Revolution, Burgundy's vineyards were actually taken away and broken up, sold into smaller pieces. But in 1804, a little guy named Napoleon instituted a system called the Inheritance Code. So Napoleonic Code of Inheritance is kind of how it's worded now, but it was basically requiring its states be divided equally among male heirs. So, we're talking 1800s. No surprise here that the ladies were left out, but any male heirs that you might have had if you owned a vineyard, it split evenly. So if you had 4 sons, that vineyard went from 100 acres to 4 25-acre properties. And this continued and continued and continued and continued to where you can get some places in Burgundy where you only own one row or a half of a row because of the inheritance code. Burgundy has evolved over the past 2 centuries in many ways, but has also remained unchanged. So talking about the close system, close Peugeot is a single-walled 125-acre or 51-hectare vineyard that was originally managed by the Cistern monks. Now it is parceled into 80 different plots with different owners. It gets so small for some of these people that some of them are only able to make a case or 2 of wine per vintage. 24 bottles of wine. And you're like, oh, there I go for this year. Well, we'll be back next. That's how much this inheritance code has affected Burgundy's winemaking. The AOP law also stimulates, though, that all of these owners can use the Grand Cru designation on their labels because they are a part of that landscape, that belonging, long as they tick all the other boxes, aging requirements and things of that nature. So, very, very interesting. And now when you get into Burgundy as a whole, it really kind of breaks up into like five major regions, and then you can get even more minute into each one of those regions. So from north to south, you have Chablis, which is up in like central France, heading towards Loire and up towards Paris. But it is very much separated from the rest of Burgundy. Chablis is a unique place. It used to be a part of a seafloor, an ocean floor, and as the sea receded, the sea life got left behind, and the soil there is made up of a lot of fossils inside that soil that adds a unique texture and flavor to the wine. It's kind of like morbid to say, but it's why it pairs so well with seafoods. It literally goes down to the soil that is made from fossilized sea creatures. It makes sense when you say it out loud, but it's kind of crazy to think like, oh, it tastes good with seafood because it literally grew on dead seafood. So as you head down south, the next region, the Côte d'Or. So we mentioned close. Now we're going to talk about d'Or. In here, the Côte part of it means slope. So this area is what many people refer to as the Golden Slope. So it is the place where people go to find the highest dollar Burgundian wines. The best of the best come out of here, and we'll jump into a little more about that and how that affects modern day investments, so to speak. So below the Côte d'Or, Côte Chalonnaise. Then we go into the Maconnais, which is below them, even more south. And then we hit a place called Beaujolais. Maybe you're familiar with the style Beaujolais Nouveau. Beaujolais is the one area that really gets kind of separate from the rest of Burgundy. We'll talk about some grape varietals, but really like Chardonnay and Pinot Noir is what everybody talks about when they talk about Burgundy. But Beaujolais is an area that grows Gamay, and they've become famous for Gamay. It was once more spread out, but then some aristocrats had their say and said it's not a great wine, so send it down south. So it's really interesting how it's grown. But Chardonnay is your big white. Aligoté you'll see around as well. Pinot Noir, the main red, the main grape, as well as Gamay being primarily grown in Beaujolais. There are 33 Grand Crus, about 2% of the plantings there are Grand Crus, or the wineries. There's about 550 to 600 Premier Crus, about 12%. There's 30% of village wines, so they still get to put the village name on it, but don't get to say Premier Cru or Grand Cru. So it's in that area, but maybe doesn't meet all the other boxes, ticks those off. And then like your table wines account for about 56% of total production. So when we talked about Chablis, that soil, most important. What I don't know if I mentioned, but want to definitely touch on, is it is 100% Chardonnay in Chablis. So no Pinot Noir that far up north. It is a cool climate. They don't really use oak on the lower tier wines, but as you climb up into those Grand Cru, Premier Cru, you will see some oak in those. There is a danger of seasonal frosts, so got to keep your eye out for that. And you will see some malolactic fermentation in there. It is a Chardonnay grape, so don't be surprised by that. So Côte d'Or, let's get into this. It's a 30-mile long escarpment that runs north to south, starting near the city of Dijon and ends in the village of Saint-Denis. It contains this very narrow ridge of limestone, and it actually gets broken down even more to the Côte de Nuit and the Côte de Beaune. So Côte de Nuit is in the north, Nuit north, Beaune south. So just remember Nuit north, and you can remember which is which. So the French word côte is translated to hillside or slope. So when they are talking about côte, and you see this in so many other regions like Italy, if you see Poggio, that means plateau or hillside. These have historically become synonymous with high quality locations for vineyards. They talk about if you're too high up the mountain, you're not going to have enough soil because all the rain washes the soil down. If you're too low down the hill, it's too wet. You won't get enough irrigation. So the middle of the slope is like where the premier location is, and so that's why they're pointing it out on their label in this area, Côte. So one of the primary aspects of terroir in this region is that slope, the soil composition you get there, the microclimates that will come into certain areas on the hills. Fog helps produce molds and mildews, and unless the sun comes and burns the fog off. But if you're far enough down the mountain, as we've seen, I think we've all seen, then there is no fog. So that, you know, all these things kind of play into why the Côte is so important to them. When you get into Côte de Nuit and Beaune, hillsides obviously are the most important. It's more continental. 100% Pinot Noir. In the Nuit, you'll see marl limestone soil. They do have some issues with frost and hail and can get some excessive rainfall. They do use French oak here. These areas are bringing some of the biggest dollars in the wine industry out there, like Gevrey-Chambertin, like Saint Denis, like Vougeot. You say these names, Voisinay, Romani, like these names are just. Even if you're not a big like wine person, you've probably either heard or seen this name somewhere before in your life, and they just bring astronomical amounts of money. So when we get down in the Côte de Beaune, you will actually see some Chardonnay and Côte de Beaune, but Pinot Noir is still the big player there. Marl and limestone. And you see a lot of more nuanced weather. It stretches out a little bit more here. So Pommard, Meursault, Volnay, Polonais, Montrachet, like very high-end producers as well. You could rock, paper, scissors all day long or flip a coin on which region you think is more important or has more prestige. Both of them are just top of the market. So if you ever get a chance to try a Côte d'Or, either Nuit, Beaune, any of those small areas, please do me a favor and try them for me. So right when you get to the end of Côte d'Or, you get into Côte Chalonnaise. So here, the difference is there's no hillside escarpments to protect the vineyards from east winds. It's a little bit more open, so it's just not as protected as the Côte d'Or. So it still is a very good region, just doesn't carry as much of that prestige as Côte d'Or because of its topographical features. When you get into this area, limestone soils, they do a few more different styles here. You can get Chardonnays here, Pinot Noir, Aligoté, and you do actually start to see some sparklings in this area as well, which makes it interesting. So Cremant de Bourguignon, you can get out of this area as well. So if you ever wanted a sparkling Burgundian, look here to Côte Chalonnaise. So as we continue to head a little further south, the Maconnais, still continental climate, a bit warmer and drier than those regions that we just left that are a little more further up north. Here you do start to see Gamay start to make an appearance. But even with that being said, this is a very white wine dominated region. They use little oak outside of an area called Pouilly-Fuissé, which is like one of my favorite places for Chardonnay. I love Pouilly-Fuissé. There's some great makers. Louis Jadot is a good one that you can find a lot of places. It's kind of like a step up. Like I think Target carries it too, or maybe Walmart. I know Target does, but you can still find some really good deals on it. But if you get into some of the single village, you get some really great deals. So now as we head into Beaujolais, this is the furthest south as it gets in Burgundy, and very small patches of Chardonnay, no Pinot Noir. I mean, it's here and there, but really Gamay is what dominates down here. You get schist and granite soil, and even some sandstone and clay as you go further south into the region. There are a few hillside vineyards, but most of it is flatter plains. The big difference here is a style, Beaujolais Nouveau, but it comes from carbonic maceration. So we'll talk about that here in a second. I still want to finish touching on just kind of like the regions here. Beaujolais, they have a Beaujolais AOP, which is wine that's made from grapes grown anywhere in Beaujolais. Then there is a version called Beaujolais Nouveau. It is really easy drinking red wines, but they are always released on the third Thursday in November following the harvest, and they should be drunk young. Then you get to Beaujolais villages. There's 38 different villages, and then Beaujolais crus, which are like the top end. Now, the neat thing with Beaujolais, and it is a unique style, this carbonic maceration. Basically, they take a big tank and they throw the whole cluster, stems, twigs, leaves, all of it in a vat, and then throw a bunch of CO2 in there, put a lid on it, and close it. And then it starts to ferment. And if you've ever seen anything that's fermenting or essentially starting to rot, they get squishy, right? So you got this big vat, and the weight of the grapes on top actually crushes the grapes on the bottom to release the juice out of the grape. It is a completely different style when you think about any kind of traditional winemaking. Typically, we take the grapes, we press it, then we take the juice and put it in something and ferment it. This is doing all of it together. You can end up with some fun, funky flavors, and sometimes when you're not ready for it, it can be off-putting, but if you are going after it to try it, or like you're expecting it to come, it can be pleasing. I will say, I do have to know these for my SOM exam that's coming up, but it is not my favorite style. So it's not everyone's cup of tea, but it is some. You can get some unique flavors like bananas, banana peel, bubblegum. So it's a unique take on wines. It really is giving a completely different, distinct levels of flavor. These wines are phenomenal with barbecue. And they do phenomenal with being chilled. So if you want a good summertime red or a chilled red, look for Beaujolais Nouveau style. Very, very, very good wines. So as we talked about, I think this was a very good introduction to Burgundy without getting too microscopic. I mean, typically I like my episodes to be about a half an hour, and this was just very broad, like speaking over the regions, and still took up a solid amount of time without getting fully in depth in some of the big notes of what makes Burgundy so complex. So we're going to hit you with a couple of quiz questions real quick. See if you guys have been paying attention. So the first question on our quiz tonight is, who was responsible for the Code of Inheritance? I'll give you a little hint. You may recognize him as a war leader who might have been shorter than most. So again, who was responsible for the Code of Inheritance? That was Napoleon in 1804. What, for question number 2, does close mean? C-L-O-S, close. That is almost a play on words, and I'll tell you how I remembered it. Close, what does close mean? It is an area of a vineyard that is completely surrounded by a wall. So I remembered it's closed off from dad joke. Oh gosh, it snuck in there. But yeah, it's closed off, a closed wall around a particular area. Next question. What is the major factor that makes Chablis unique? What's the major factor that makes Chablis unique? So I'm not talking about what does Chablis do a little bit differently? Because you could be thinking maybe it's that they only do Chardonnay there. Well, there's plenty of regions in the world that only do Chardonnay. So what is it that Chablis has that gives it a unique flavor? It's where they grow. It's the soil composition, that fossilized soil composition. True or false? Côte de Beaune is north of Côte Nuit. True or false? Côte de Beaune is north of Côte de Nuit. That is false. If you remember, Côte de Nuit, Nuit north, Beaune south. So I just thought we'd have a little fun and try to remind ourselves of a couple of fun ideas and some of the bigger notes. I didn't throw a big curveball in there like, which day is Beaujolais Nouveau harvested or released on? The third Thursday in November after harvest. I mean, you probably remember it now, maybe for like the next day or two, but it is unique how they get that specific. Third Thursday in November following the harvest. Can't we just, whatever. That's how they do it. That's how they do it. But I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. If you want to hear more about Burgundy and its nuances that it has, I'd be happy to take a real deep dive in that. You guys just let me know. If you haven't already, please consider supporting us. There is a sign-up, donation, where you can help fund the podcast. Think of it as public TV, a little PBS, public radio, where we can get together, have some hangouts. We do some one-on-one tastings. We do some group classes, some face-to-face kind of interaction, or at least like Zoom. So if you're interested in that, or hanging out with me, or just supporting what we do here, any monetary donation definitely helps us keep this podcast rolling. I want to thank you all, as well as for all the support, all the likes and shares. If you are interested, we do have embroidered hats now with the Duckvine logo. So if you're looking for some Duckvine merch, please just shoot me a message on Instagram and or Twitter, and we will get you hooked up with that. It's the Duckvine on all our social media. Be happy to see you guys supporting the logo out there. Because you guys are all amazing and support us so wonderfully anyways. So I hope you enjoyed this dive into Burgundy. Thank you guys so much for your support. As always, I hope you had fun. Maybe you learned a few things. But the most important thing is we got to drink some wine. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.